Hi, I'm Scott Kearnan, food and entertainment editor at Boston Magazine. And thanks for joining us for the latest edition of Power Talks, which is Boston Magazine's virtual event series where we've been speaking with some of the most influential people in the city, the names and faces that appear in our new Power 100 list. Today, we're going to be speaking with one of Boston's most acclaimed, well known, and passionate chefs and restaurateurs, Tiffani Faison, about the state of the restaurant industry in Boston, which, as we all know, is in a very different place in our current COVID era. Now, Tiffany's company, Big Heart Hospitality, is behind some of your favorite restaurants in Boston, certainly some of mine anyway, including Sweet Cheeks Q, Tiger Mama, Orfano, and Fool's Errand. So we're super excited to hear from her about where the industry is and where she sees it going in the future. Before we dive into all that, here now just a brief word from our sponsor, Ethic, a wealth bank.
Thanks a lot, Scott. Ethical Wealth Bank is delighted to partner with Boston Magazine to host this very important series, Power Talks, which is all about rebuilding our economy. This week in particular, the conversation is around restaurants and small businesses that are ramping back up as part of Phase 2. Supporting our local businesses at this time will be critically important. And if you can get back out there and do so, that's great. If not, please support them by continuing to order takeout or by buying gift certificates. Every little bit helps. Tiffani Faison is an absolute rock star. She has built an incredible culinary empire over the years and has started a number of amazing restaurants. In fact, I've had the pleasure of eating at a few of them, and the food and the atmosphere is great. I can't think of a better person right now to have a conversation with about phasing back in the restaurants. I am sure it's going to be complex. There's a lot of nuance to it, and it's not easy. But Tiffani, with her experience over the years, is the perfect person to have this conversation with. So thank you very much for listening today. Now, please enjoy the conversation.
All right, we're back to Power Talks. I'm Boston Magazine food and entertainment editor Scott Kearnan, and joining us now is Big Heart Hospitality's acclaimed chef and restaurateur Tiffani Faison. Tiffani, strange circumstances, but it's great to see you again.
Strange days. It is really nice to see you, Scott. How are you?
I'm hanging in there as best as we can in this climate. How about yourself?
I'm healthy. I'm hanging in. It's just a strange time. In many ways, it's obviously challenging, but there's some silver linings around this time as well, and I'm trying to kind of focus on those a little bit.
That's the most you can do right now, for sure. Definitely want to talk to you, obviously, about just how the hospitality and restaurant industry is adjusting to this very strange, quote unquote, new normal that we're in. But before we even get into that, I just wanted to kind of check in and see, how are you and your staff holding up? What have you been doing in this time just to take care of yourself and each other in really unprecedented times?
Yeah, the answer is, as far as people will be honest with me about how they are, and we're starting to see each other again, so I'm able to kind of check in a little bit further about how people are and what their experiences have been. It's been interesting just trying to have conversation with them without being able to physically be in the same space. So much of what we do in hospitality is really about sharing space and understanding how we can be good to each other and help each other. And a lot of that is just gained by the physical nuance of being close to each other. So losing that has been really hard. And at the core of who we are, most of us do this because we love being around people. We love making people feel good and being hospitable and taking care of people. So, to separate people physically and really take that core element out of what we do has been just another layer, I think, of the difficulty of what all of COVID has brought about for us. So, I'm okay, I guess. I'm anxious about moving forward, but I'm excited about moving forward and hopeful and all the things. It's literally I think the kids say all the feels, and it is literally all the feels right now.
My kid lingo is a little outdated at this point. That sounds on fleek. I'm here with it. Definitely all the feels. And I'm sure they're changing every day too, because the circumstances are changing every day in a lot of ways.
Exactly. From federal regulations to, opening phases and what they mean and when they're going to happen. It's, it's such, and I understand that, like, this is uncharted. So a lot of things we just have to be really patient and nimble. And I'm trying to be patient and nimble right alongside the regulations. And I understand that no one has a roadmap for how to deal with this. Starting with the PPP program, and that came down, and we, whether you got funded, whether you didn't get funded, and it was really a lot about your relationship with banks and people with, we saw a lot of giant companies that had incredible, really intimate relationships with big banks get funded very quickly. And that caused a lot of fear and a lot of, ancillary angst in our industry, and I think that still is and remains, and there's been some coalescing in our industry about independent restaurants coming together, and like the IRC, and making sure that it's not just like giant chains that are being represented. So yeah, things change really, really quickly. Even last Saturday we heard that Monday we could open outside, and so there's been this mad scramble to kind of open outside, and all of those things, and the regulations and things that are coming our way are also really met with our obligation to do the right thing for our business, do the right thing for our guests, to keep them safe, for our team. And it's not just about, calling people back. It's a lot about what they're also comfortable with. There are people that on our team that may have underlying health conditions, or that may just not feel comfortable, or, there's a lot that has to go into who comes back and how and why. And how we do this moving forward. It's not as easy as just like turn the lights on and we're all back.
Yeah, no, it's not a light switch scenario. It's all about finding that balance between business sustainability and also public health and safety, and trying to do your best as you can in circumstances we never confronted before. Right.
And then still trying to deliver service and product that we are proud of and want to deliver, that's also appropriate for this time. Some of that changes, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
100%. I'm curious, we've been talking and writing a lot about just how these circumstances have impacted the hospitality industry, the level of gravity of the circumstance, I guess I should say. And I wanted to hear, directly, and I think it's important for people to hear directly from someone like yourself, who's a figurehead in that community. Tell us, what is it like to be in the industry right now in circumstances like this, in terms of being a business owner?
It is jarring. It's grounding. It's you have to get really honest with yourself very quickly about your operations and how we've grown in the past few years. And we've really candidly been living in an incredible economy for the past, almost close to 10 years, to 8 years now. Right. And we've operated as such. And, we've had a city where labor has not been abundant. It's been very difficult to find people. And so there's been, and I'll speak very candidly from my operations, there have been some workarounds around like trying to hire people, retaining people, even like building an incredible culture and trying to pay fair wages, and all of those things have not really been enough. There's been a bit of a culture of, people that bounce really quickly out of jobs or don't show up for interviews. And so it's been an opportunity for us to really have a lot of hard conversation about what are the things that we're not doing as an organization that we could be better at. Also, what are the things that we have maybe kind of turned a blind eye to in the last few years, operationally, culinarily, in terms of like technique or whatever it might be, things that aren't at the top of our standards anymore. And how do we take this time to really, reteach and if we're going to open slowly and bring people back slowly, how do we make sure that we do it with intention, and we do it in a way that makes us proud of how we come back, and that we come back better than we ever were. So, that's the goal, but the feel of it is, it's really frightening. It's super frightening. I think there's been so many things. I think the one thing that, not one thing, but something early on that scared me the most was when Trump said, well, the amount of restaurants will come back, but who owns them might be different. And I just thought, yes. He's like, this might be the only time I've ever said this. He's 100% right. He's 100% right. And if our guests are not thoughtful about who they come back to, like if we're running back to major national chains or like right away, and if we're continuing to go to those restaurants, they have plenty of money to float this for a while. Right. And we don't. So it's really about prioritizing. And so my fear is really focused right now in where our guests will come back to and where they'll stay and continue to habitually, eat at or choose to drink at or order takeout with.
Sure. Well, to that point, I mean, you're 100% right. It's really dependent on consumers to decide where they're going to be going back and where they're going to be spending their dollars, who they're going to be supporting. And a lot of these really huge entities do have the ability to sustain themselves for at least a little bit. From the perspective of, an independent enterprise, how effective or not has the response been from the city, the state, et cetera, in terms of helping to keep this industry afloat? Like, what, if anything, has been helpful and what has been missing?
Right. I will say, I think Mayor Walsh has been very good about staying in communication with a lot of us and being very open and allowing his time and a lot of face-to-face conversation. Well, Zoom to Zoom conversation.
Can do in these circumstances.
Exactly. But giving us that time and really listening to what it is that we need and being open to being nimble with that. Governor Baker, I think, has also been helpful in that way. And, they've really, the focus and the priority is public health. And we understand that. There is no part of any restaurateur that thinks that we should rush back and make rash decisions. Like we all know that we don't all know this, but like we'll figure out if we can come back once. But what we're all really sure of is we can't come back twice. So being cautious and being really prudent in our actions is helpful. And I think both on city and state levels, that's been great. I think if we're missing anything, a little more planning, like, the knowing when the phases are going to come in. I feel like there's probably more information about timing that we're not really given. Like knowing Saturday that we can open Monday, like it for me, it creates this fear that maybe people who are a little lax operationally or in terms of their cleanliness standards or whatever, like just going to run back to being open without really taking the time to think. I mean, we have gone through procedure and like walking through every step of service. What does it look like? What if someone has to do this? What if someone has to go to the restroom? What if someone, and they will, and walking physically through that and understanding like what the needs at every second are going to be, what our guests are going to feel comfortable with, what to pivot to if they don't, how do we go above and beyond to make sure that people are safe when they're dining outside or inside of our restaurants when that comes. So a little bit more, timing communication would be great, but I also understand that there are a gazillion industries that they're dealing with. It's not just hospitality. So that, really our public officials are juggling a lot of balls. And I appreciate, the work that's being done. If there's one thing I think is really missing, it has been the ability to do full cocktails and takeout. That just makes no sense that hasn't been pushed through quicker. That's essentially like we can do mixers and you can buy your booze, but I make my money on booze. So the mixers actually cost me more money. So I am juicing fresh juices and doing all these things that we normally do and selling them for like less than I would sell a cocktail for. I'm losing money on these, and it's at this point it just becomes in some ways an amenity to what we're doing, and it's lovely, but we're not really making any money off of it. So there's been kind of a deaf ear around the things that we could do quicker around liquor license laws. That just could have been done a lot quicker. I feel like there's some stuff that was no brainers that like. And there's, that sort of puritanical pilgrim mindset. It's like, what is the problem? Just hit go. Like, just hit the gas. Like, what's the concern? That someone's going to take a mixer out and, like, stand in the street and, like, get all hammered? I don't understand. You could go to Target next door and go buy a bottle of vodka and stand in the street and do the same thing. Like, what's the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to reckon with the idea that people are already going for their cocktail walks anyway. There's some... Let's be real.
Yeah.
Let's be real. In terms of, and that's all really important in terms of the communication that's been coming through to you, and in terms of some of the policies that we'd love to see be enacted. From the standpoint of just pure old-fashioned nuts and bolts, like financial relief, what exists and what doesn't? What voids need to be filled? Because restaurant workers represent, like 1 in 10 workers in the state. This is a huge part of our workforce.
Huge, absolutely. So the PPP came through. Some people have been able to get it, and some people haven't. And I think what we need to focus on in terms of the industry, and I'll take myself out of this entirely because I feel like I have the resources and the tools to be able to manage some relief on my end. I can't bring everyone back right now, but I can bring some people back. I think what we're really looking at in terms of needs for the state are focusing on minority-owned businesses, on businesses that didn't get PPP, on businesses that have, a significant amount of African American and Latino ownership that are not necessarily getting funded, that don't have the spotlight and don't have the relationships with traditional banks. So, and that there needs to be specific and very pointed help that goes to those restaurants that make sure they come back and then make sure that they have the help that they need to keep our communities in all forms alive and moving forward.
Absolutely. So this week marks the beginning of the phase 2 reopening process. As you said, things are very fluid, but that's where we are right now. How are your restaurants reacting to this part of the opening? What are you deciding to do? And what are some of those practical steps that you mentioned earlier that you're taking to strike this balance between sustainability as a business and public health and safety?
Yeah, so phase 2 is starting, it started Monday. And it's lovely to see people out on sidewalks eating. It's really exciting. It feels just like a taste, like a morsel of normal. So that's really helpful to see. I did a big walk last night. I went for my normal evening walk, and I walked, instead of doing the Esplanade, I walked through the South End because I wanted to see, and I saw Aquitaine open, and they had music out there, and it was lovely. And I had this moment where I thought, oh, this is great, and this feels so like almost normal. We were talking about this earlier. And then I had this huge fear that people are going to think that like we're successful now because we can put 14 people on a patio. Like it's going to look like, it's essentially a sugar pill, right? Like it looks like it's going to fix some things. It really is not. And so with even expanded outdoor seating and really getting creative about that, which I think the city is trying to do. I would like to see them move just a little bit faster. But they're logjam. Like it's all about just this logjam of resources from every industry and every, and I hope the city is really having some conversation about their flow through and what they need to make things more efficient in terms of ISD and fire and health and all those things that have traditionally been kind of more arduous processes in the city. So I hope they're doing the same thing we're doing and kind of just like doing a full excavation of how things run and how things could be better. So, which this time has given us all a lot of time to be able to kind of do and work out. So yeah, I wasn't planning on opening phase 2 until next week or the week after. And then after walking around last night, I just thought, the city, people need this, aside from is it going to bring a bunch of money into the restaurants? Absolutely not. It's not going to be solvent in any way, shape, or form. But is it nice to just feel some humanity in restaurant spaces and have music in the streets and feel like there's a little bit of hope? I don't know. And we've been through a very difficult couple of weeks, and it's not just restaurants. Really having conversations about police brutality and social justice, and having protests in the street, and having that be active and that be really something that people are finally listening to. Not that those two necessarily correlate, but I think it's, in some ways, we all just need to see more life on the streets, whether it's in the form of protest or it's in the form of eating out and making sure that we're supporting each other and having some sort of community with each other. So
bring the heartbeat back to the city.
Exactly. To be honest, I think what's been really refreshing and incredible to watch is the protest did it first, right? They brought this heartbeat back that not only brought the heartbeat back to the city, said in all of the cities, and said, this is how we want our cities to behave and move forward. And there's no better example of, unfortunately, it's had to come at the horrendous murder of multiple Black people in order for this to happen. But a lot of people sat at home for a long time, and then there was this. I think the fissures really they broke. They really came apart when George Floyd was killed, and that was it. And so it has been really nice to see that leadership come through the city and essentially like forcibly open the city in that way.
100%. It's really pierced the bubble in a lot of ways. And as you mentioned, and we were talking about just before we started, I was out for the first time last night dining in the South End at Aquitaine on their patio, and I was looking around and doing kind of my best guess at numbers and trying to figure out how can a situation like this be sustainable, where it does seem like at any one given point, there couldn't be more than, I don't know, a dozen to 15 folks dining on the patio. How long can something like this be sustainable? What does that look like?
It's an individual question for each restaurant. The ultimate answer is just at base level. It's not, and it can't be. So again, that's the conversation about not wanting it to be a sugar pill where we look at it and go, oh, this is fine and things are fine. It's a lot about landlord negotiation. It's about negotiating with vendors, and it's not, there's no like good guy, bad guy in this. Like everyone's been hit. So and so ultimately that becomes at the end of the day about relationships, which is again going back to like the integrity of how you run your business, who you do business with, how you communicate, how you help each other, what those relationships ultimately are and form and become over the course of the years that you do business with someone in all of those forms. So, and that's not necessarily like quid pro quo, like the relationship is great and so you'll have a ton of forgiveness or you'll be able to negotiate incredible deals. That's not necessarily the case. But I will say like the majority of people that we do business with have been open to negotiations and to how we can come back together and how we can, support each other through this and get back financially. So the question to how does that become solvent financially is really about the game of financial Jenga that you end up playing in your restaurants. And that's a lot about, if you remember 2007-8 in restaurants, like it went from, and it was kind of high on the hog before that. And I hate using that phrase. But we were in this incredible like economy, and all of a sudden it was like linen's gone, flour's gone, pastry chef's gone, sommelier is like the fat. And I don't mean to say those positions are fat, but restaurants can run without them. All of that went away. And to be honest, like the flowers and linens and stuff like that have never been part of like the bills that I pay. Like if there's flowers in my restaurant, no, I did them myself. Like that's just it's not stuff I pay for. So, but really looking at running business is very lean again. And that's scary. Like that's really scary. And, it's about being as efficient as possible. And all of the I don't want all of the things that we've worked for to go away. I don't want, some of the amenities that I've been able to build into the company for people that work for me, into like senior officers, whatever it might be, ways that I've found to show people that they matter to me and to take some, whether it's financial obligations or just like doing kind things or being able to like step in financially for people here and there. I don't want to have to take that off the table. But I don't know how we move forward and sustain businesses. The question is like, do you want to get back to that at some point someday? Or do you want to like continue to live in the same world that doesn't exist anymore and lose your businesses? It really is that stark. Those are your choices.
Those are the options available. Yeah. So from a diner standpoint, how do you anticipate things looking different when I come to dine at one of your restaurants next week when things reopen? For example, when I was out last night, there was hand sanitizer on the table. There was a QR code that I scanned to bring the menu up on my phone. There were lots of little changes like that. And I'm curious what you're thinking about doing for your restaurants, both on the outdoor and, if you've gotten that far, the indoor concepts as well.
Yeah. So outdoor, I think will feel the closest to normal. If normal is the standard from which we're like judging and moving, outdoor will feel the closest to normal. You will see hand sanitizer on tables. Servers will be in masks. If they choose to, they can wear gloves. There'll be a lot of hand washing. We'll use QR codes for menus so that there's no menus that are passed between people, because the alternative is we print menus on paper, you touch them, we throw them away or recycle them. So we end up going through a lot of paper, and that's expensive. And then the forest is like jumping off it, trees are dying in effigy. So a lot of those things you'll see little changes. You'll see like little paper bags on the table for your mask, so your mask doesn't have to be on the table. And you'll see just, I think, a slightly slower pace, just as we figure this out and what this is, and us having active conversations with you guys about just patience and kindness and, bearing with us for a minute. But one of the things that we're really working on moving forward is making our outdoor spaces that much more welcoming and lovely and feeling like they're enveloping you. If we can't see you inside yet, so that's part of it. And then inside, I literally, it keeps me up at night thinking about inside. All of the science out there tells us that plexiglass helps, but it's not solvent. The idea of putting up plexiglass is just about as attractive as the idea of eating in a plexiglass cage. We'll do what we need to do. Don't get me wrong, but we're going to try and do beautiful, creative things around it. I don't know. I don't have the inside figured out yet, and it's expensive. There is a cottage industry of people that are super happy to make lots of money on. I got an email from a friend that said, "Hey, I'm having these barriers made," and they're plexiglass with some just basic welding, and it was they're $600 each.
Oh my gosh!
How much do I have to make to recoup what? It's usually a 10 times factor, right? So for if I'm going to spend money on something in a restaurant, if it's $600, I need to know that I'm going to get $6,000 out of it inside of 90 days. Do I know, or less than that? But there's a lot more behind it, but is that going to happen? And that's not one. That's one in between a booth, in between another 6 feet in booth. It's daunting.
And like you said, there is sort of a cottage industry that's springing up around a lot of this. I'm sure soon there'll be, artisan plexiglass dividers for your restaurant.
Yeah. In the same way that when we first saw masks, everyone had these sort of white medical masks. And now in some ways it's kind of fun. Masks are as funky and as whatever as the person that's wearing them. So it's great.
It's the new sneaker.
Yeah, it is. But it's also, the buy-in is at a much lower cost. And what do I do with all of this stuff, all this PPE that I've purchased? And I don't mean the softwares, masks and stuff like that, gloves. I mean, what do I do with this major equipment, all of this stuff, when this is over? And I don't have any use for it, but I also maybe there's going to be another round, or maybe there's going to be another pandemic that I would do I throw it away? What do I, it's just it's this financial and waste question that I just can't get my head around. And there are some forms of those questions that have come up in this that I know we're here, I know we're in a pandemic, but I still can't play the mental Olympics to figure some of the stuff out in a way that feels either financially solvent or not wasteful or whatever, or either, both.
Yeah. Well, and you said, when this is over, and the question of when this will be over is a very open-ended one for sure.
Yeah.
I'm also curious, are there certain things that are changing right now in terms of what diners' expectations might be, how the industry is responding, what consumer habits might look like, that you think might continue to impact the industry even after the pandemic is over, quote unquote? Will there be kind of permanent changes on a systemic level that arise from this?
I think there will be changes that arise. Permanent, I don't know. I think that we, as humans, are very adept at sort of going back into the thing that we knew and loved previously. I think we want to be close together. I don't think that, I don't know, there's so many, there's so many different factors of this I can talk about. Do we want to have tables further apart? Fine, then we're going to have completely different rent structures, because we're all we've agreed to rent deals that are inherently tied to how many people we can seat in a restaurant, how often we turn those tables, what the average diner pays at each one of those seats and each one of those turns. So there are things that are just not solvent financially. If the average consumer would say, hey, I'd like, just a lot more space when I sit down, that becomes this domino effect of things that are not sustainable financially. And maybe that is a conversation that we work out with our landlords, if that's something that we move forward with. I don't know. I don't think that there's a lot that diners are going to really grasp onto in this time and be like, hey, I really love this. This is great. You know what I mean? I think restaurant operations, sure. Yes. I think that there are things that, for me, and this is a running joke in my company, if the entire building's on fire, but everything's clean, I'm fine. But I'm a nut. Like, ask any of my people, like, our restaurants are clean. We make sure that they're clean from top to bottom. And it's the core of how we move forward. For me, like, I think it's how people trust us. It's how I feel good about what we're doing. And that's how I function. That's my baseline. So incredible levels of cleanliness. So continuing to maintain those and make sure that even that standard gets bolstered up and rises in some ways. When we see economies really suffer like this in restaurants and in other industries as well, but what we see is like the move back towards extreme efficiency. We're not right. Like people, how do we break one job down and do it faster, do it better, do it smarter? Because as we sort of grow in the amount of restaurants that we have and being busy and all of the things that happen in a good economy, some of those efficiencies kind of get lost along the way. And so it really is it becomes time to focus back on those. And with that, you see, the need for less jobs, it's heartbreaking. And I don't know how to, I've heard restaurateurs say, I'm going to bring the same amount of people back and I was like, how? I don't know how. I mean, I'm going to work on it and do the best that I possibly can, but I don't know if we're operating at 25% capacity, 50% capacity, how we bring back 100% of our labor. It's just, it's really about being as smart as possible and really working with people that come back and understand that and are on board with that and value having a job, because I think we're working with a generation of young people that I absolutely adore, but they've worked in this environment where there's always been 10 jobs in one person. And now that's going to flip for the first time in their lives where there's, 10 people in one job. So that the reverberations of that are going to be felt in many different ways.
Absolutely. For sure. And thinking about the future and sort of new projects or future projects, when this all happened, when COVID landed upon us like a ton of bricks, you were, it seems, pretty close to opening 2 new concepts inside High Street Place, which is a food hall that's planned to open downtown. Tell me a little bit about the state of affairs there, where those projects stand, as well as anything else that you've been kind of conceptualizing going forward.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't 2, it was 3, and we were going to announce that right before we were opening. Yep.
There's the scoop, everybody.
I know. I'm not going to tell you what the third one is. It's they're built. They're gorgeous. They're ready to go. Like, we're ready to go. And it's not just my concepts. Like, there are so many cool concepts in High Street. It's amazing. Like, Noodle Boss is there, and Penny Packers is there, and Haley Jane, which is this fried chicken joint from the Wheelhouse guys, and Bad Donuts there. I mean, it's just it's so beautiful and it's cool, and like, I've never seen a food hall like it, like outside of Europe, like just really like built so nicely, and it's a destination for a lot of people to gather at the same time. Great. Right. So we're having conversation with them, and my partners in those ventures have been extraordinary. I mean, I remember gathering with them in this space and just talking about this was right before the Celtics game was called, or the basketball game was called, when someone like literally walked on the court and was like, "We're done." Right. It was right before that happened, and so the gravity of this wasn't totally felt yet. And I remember standing in the space and having a conversation, and one of the principals said, "Well, if they start pulling kids from school, like, we're really might be in kind of some trouble here." And then it was just this like avalanche of like. I think in a lot of ways it was the basketball game first, and then that began the like significant gravity of what we were dealing with, and then it was like just like crazy closing. So we don't have an opening date. They're so smart and thoughtful and intentional in the same way which is one of the reasons I signed on to this project. They sort of matched a lot of the mores of my company and what we do. And there's no rush to a money grab here. It's really about making sure that it's opened right and that people can experience it for the first time in a way that's incredible and fun and impactful. And also they're doing everything they can to do right by the vendors that signed on to be in the space. And they've been incredible to everyone. And worked on a program to feed hospitals where we cooked, and I mean, they've been great. So we don't have a time for that. And in terms of like trajectory forward for things and growth, they're there isn't right now, and that's okay. So, which has maybe been one of the small benefits of this. I took a break. Like I haven't had a break in I don't know how long. And I think I I thought I've had breaks where I'm like, no, I'll go on vacation for a week. And that means like reading emails for 3 hours a day and then doing and then having like the great restaurant race in whatever city I'm going to. I haven't actually had a break. And so it's been really nice to have some time that's been really self-reflective and useful in that time. So yeah. So the answer is nothing moving forward. High Street is obviously next on the docket, with every, precaution moving forward. And so we don't know what that looks like yet. But past that, I don't know. Like my priority is making sure that the restaurants on Boylston Street are thriving at some point or surviving at the very least. So we're opening Tiger and Sweet Cheeks for outdoor dining Friday and Saturday this week. So, and then we'll open Orfano next week. And Orfano opens for takeout this week on Friday.
Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. You'll see my name on the list to get some of that pizza lasagna very soon.
Yeah. We're changing the format of Orfano before, it's not a giant scoop, but when I said we're adjusting to like what's appropriate for the time, the style of dining outside will change at Orfano, and we're taking this opportunity to do a little more red saucy, kind of Mamma Mia, like have some fun with the menu. Slightly bigger portions, a little bit more like chicky parm. So that'll be fun. And I think, eating outside in the summer, that kind of looks a little bit more like what people might want to experience in that type of environment. So I also want to be sensitive around, like how we do this and how we come back. So, and it's going to be hard to push the martini cart out on the sidewalk. So I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but we'll figure some stuff out. If you guys are patient with us, we'll continue to figure stuff out.
Absolutely. And that's a good moment to also remind everyone, please be patient. When you go back out to eat again, everyone is adjusting to this new normal as best they can. That goes to the people that work in restaurants. That goes to people that are eating out with you in restaurants. Be nice, be kind to yourself and each other, people. We had some questions as well from folks, just readers who wanted to chime in. And this is a really good one, I think. It comes from Manish Sharma. They ask, do you think dining at restaurants will become a more expensive and exclusive activity for diners because of the way that some of these new costs are going to end up getting passed down?
Oof, I hope not. I think that's going to end up to the individual restaurateur. I will tell you this, like our costs are just through the roof right now. Like, and it's food because all of our food systems have been so disrupted. So our food, you guys are watching groceries climb. Like we all go to the grocery store and you check out and you're like, I'm gonna, what? Like, how is that much money? It was not that much money 3 months ago. So we're seeing our food costs climb. We're seeing our cost for PPE climb. Takeout. I mean, these are just things that, look, we signed up for this and we know that there are costs to bear. But at some point, if we don't in some way pass them along or share them with our guests, we'll die. We'll close. So you can't imagine how much money it costs us to put 2 different kinds of barbecue sauce and, jalapeno ranch and all of these things in individual containers and make sure that they're packaged up and ready to go. Like, it's expensive. So I hope not. I think the exclusivity of it is probably inherent to just like, we have less tables. So not exclusive in like a crappy, like, oh, can you get in? Can you blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't care about that stuff. I don't want that to happen, but just in the sheer amount of like seats and tables that we'll be allowed to have, like the answer to that is like, probably in some hopefully not gross way.
Fair enough. Another question that came in, and this is an incredibly important one at all times, certainly something that's in the conversation in a particularly profound way right now, which is how can those in the restaurant industry work to make this industry more equitable and accessible to all?
Yeah, that's a great conversation, and it's a really good question to move forward, and we're talking about it a lot. So one of the things that we created essentially like a guide to like how to bring people back into BHH in each restaurant. We had conversations with the general managers, conversations with, the chefs and in each manager in their own department and who we brought back. And it had a lot to do with people that have great attitudes and have been a part of the team and are willing to learn and to kind of cross over. There is no like, I only work this station anymore. Like that's over, right? And so we're also taking this as an opportunity to really cross-train and allow people to understand each other's jobs in more meaningful ways. So I think that is, that's one way that we're really looking at it. In terms of wage equality, I'm deeply afraid that this is going to have an impact that is difficult, that affects people of color and people that have historically been already affected by this. We're doing our best to make sure that that's not happening. We're trying to figure out ways to bring people back in a way that feels like wages are equitable and fair, and not just feels, but they are. There's a lot of systemic stuff that we can kind of take apart in this. We're talking about changing and looking at our tipping systems now. We're talking about how do we redistribute some of that funded, like those funds, and how do we do it? We're going to need some help from our regulators, because there are very specific rules about who can receive tipped wages, who can't. So as we're opening back slowly, we're able to kind of manipulate and do some things where, like, some of the cooks can come out and bring food to you and have a conversation with you. And so that meets requirements about them being part of the tip pool. And are we doing that? Does that make sense? So it's a lot about, and one of the things we've had a lot of conversation about is skill set versus like attitude and willingness. And we have a lot of things that we say in the company. And one is talent beats work or work beats talent when the talent doesn't work. So the laziness will go away. And so like people coming in with like great attitudes and just wanting to learn will have an opportunity to really like get in and be able to work side by side with people that are talented and rise very quickly. But that's, in a lot of ways, that's always been the case, not historically in the restaurant industry, but for the most part in BHH, like that's been, I mean, there's no seniority. It's a meritocracy.
Absolutely. Well, we talked earlier too in the conversation about trying to find some of these little silver linings amongst all the sort of devastating news, and the ability to break down some of these systems and rebuild them a bit is one of those silver linings.
Yeah, if we take this opportunity to do it, right? So we've been given all this time to sort of hopefully take a good look inside, both whether. For me, it's been personally, professionally, it's been a lot of things. It's been a time. Like I've had a lot of time to think. Personally, candidly, I'm going through a divorce. I'm in the middle of like figuring out how to run the company in different ways that feels more sustainable and feels smarter and better for all of us. Like it's just all of that. And so I've taken a lot of time to think about that. And I'm hoping that, and I know we're having that conversation as a whole in the restaurant industry. We're also talking about how we essentially organize as independent restaurants and think about those things in a brain trust and move forward and share what we're learning with each other. So yeah, I really hope that for everyone, both personally and professionally, this has been a time to like turtle in a little bit and think about how, when we come out of our shell entirely, how we want to come out and what that looks like.
100%. And once that martini cart is back in action, you and I are going to talk about some other things that we won't bring the Zoom conversation into.
Fair enough. We need a good catch up. Yeah,
I think so. What has been as we wrap up here, I'm curious, what has been the thing that you've learned about yourself in this process? I mean, you've gone through so much. Again, you say personally, professionally. What have you learned about yourself and taken out of this?
I was more tired than I knew before this happened. I'm learning. I don't know that I've learned, like, period, done. I'm done with the race. I've learned that I knew that I was resilient. I've learned that I've continued to learn how resilient I am in multiple different ways. I've learned how to be nimble, how to continue to stay nimble, how to not be attached to things. I have learned how little I like bullshit conversation. I mean, I didn't anyway, but then when you take like all of the noise around you away for like 2 months, and then you find yourself in it, I'm like, like I literally find myself physically walking away from conversations. I've learned a lot. I've learned how I want to move forward in my company. And I think I've this might be a little personal, but I've been someone who has had my hands and my opinions and maybe a little bit more micromanaging than I should in every layer of everything that I'm doing. And I'm exhausted. And I'm also, in some ways, I've not been empowering the people that are on my team that are super talented and super capable and can figure out these answers. And in a lot of ways can do it without me and do it better. And so what my role is in the company, I think as I'm getting older and we're growing, needs to change. Like, my line cook mentality is over, and it's taken a lot for me to get there, where it's like, well, if I'm not scrubbing down and I'm not, and it's like, I can't do all, and I've been exhausting myself trying to do all that stuff for too long. And so seeing myself in a different light and being able to accept myself in that role in a different light and still be able to be the me that hopefully brings in, the cheerleading and the magic into the company, and a part of that, just balancing that. So, and also just, again, like, personal integrity. I've learned a lot about how important that is to me in my life, and that those are really hard lines for me. And there's no compromise that I'm willing to make that will, not financially, not ethically, that allows me to stomp on those things. It doesn't. To that point, really quickly, I want to have a conversation because, I'd never make it out of a conversation without talking about abuse in the industry. And I think, wanting to save the restaurant industries and this great want to support all of us has been incredible. And it's been really lovely to have people reach out to us in a myriad of different ways and ask how they can be supportive. It's going to take a lot to bring our restaurants back, and some people aren't going to make it. And this isn't me saying, get rid of half the restaurants. It's not what I'm saying. Like, you do this for a living. You really want people to survive. Like, you pull for almost everyone. I do want to have a conversation about where we're putting our money and our resources right now. Like, if we are eating out at chain restaurants and we want to see independent restaurants in Boston survive, rethink that decision. And I can hear people when they say, well, what about the people that work there? They can go work for independent restaurants. Like, they can, and I'm not saying like those restaurants shouldn't exist, but I'm saying the priority should be with the restaurants that work in our community, that put money back into our community directly. That money doesn't leave. Similarly, I want to make sure that we are putting our butts in seats at restaurants that you are 100% sure that these are not owned by abusers, because you are putting your money in their pocket to come back strong. And you're signing a check. You're putting your credit card down that says, I consent to the abuse that's happened here. Bring it back. Because unless that lesson is learned in very real ways, the behavior doesn't change. I'm watching chefs in Boston that are abusers on social media get up there and champion and cheer for the restaurant industry to come back. Further than that, telling other people that they're not being loud enough and they're not advocating enough. And the only thing I've ever seen some of these people advocate is for themselves and their own financial livelihood. So know where you're putting money.
Absolutely. Every time you put money in one pocket, that also means that you're not putting it in the pocket of someone who is doing good work to undo some of these systems, some of these issues, and is using their platform in a way that is responsible and important. And for that, we'll always say thank you, because you always do that. Wonderful.
We're not perfect. We're not perfect. I've got shit I've got blinders, and I don't always see everything, but we're open to the conversation and always working to just be better.
No one's perfect, but working towards it is half the battle, right?
Yeah.
Tiffani, thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
It's so nice. It's nice to see your face.
You too. And I love that I can see you more on Chopped now too. That's a nice bonus.
I've become a regular judge on Chopped now that Chopped isn't filming anymore. Yay me.
It's just an early vacation. They banked all the days off at the front.
We started talking about filming dates, so I'll be back. And there's stuff in the can that hasn't been seen yet. So there's some really exciting, can't talk about it, but there's some really fun, exciting stuff that should be up fairly soon.
I love it. Well, thanks again. Can't wait to see you on TV, and more importantly, in real life very soon. Save me a martini.
Do that. I absolutely will. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for everyone who joined us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.